Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the Communication Mastery Podcast. I'm glad you're with us. My name's Mark Burlinson, and we're having this journey together of increasing our communication mastery. It's a great journey and one that you'll benefit from in every area of your life. Back in episode 3, we talked about our takeaway, if you remember, that you don't know what you don't know. And that's why the life language profile is so helpful to you, because it gives you aha moments about how you're wired, how you communicate, and how you need to adapt to be able to connect more effectively with other people. Because in the end, that's what life is all about, isn't it? You're not an island, you're not an isolated individual. No matter how introverted or disconnected from the world you are, you still have to interact with other people. And if you can do that effectively, both you benefit and the folks that you're around will benefit too. And so we want to learn how to connect more effectively. We want to learn how to bridge our own preferred communication styles to the different and unique communication styles of the people around us. And that's what we're going to focus in on for this episode. How do I understand other people with the insight that the life languages can give me? How do I apply what I know about myself to my interactions with other people? We've said it again and again, and it's worth repeating one more time here. Self-awareness is the key starting point for communication. Until I understand myself more effectively, more clearly, more accurately, I really can't begin to then adapt to other people, because I end up starting from the wrong place. If you put the wrong address into your GPS, you're not going to end up the place you wanted to go. And if you start from the wrong starting point in your communication, then it's not going to be as effective as it could be. So I'm all about self-awareness, and I keep on about it again and again with the folks I coach and the folks I train, because if I know how I see myself, it helps me to understand, it gives me insight into how I come across to other people as well. For example, we talked a little bit in episode 3 about act, feel, or think, and we're going to zero in on that much more today. Some of the life languages are all about action. Some of them are much more about emotions and feelings, and some are more about thinking, and they're much more cognitive. And that's great, because you need all three, don't you? In life, we operate in all of those, just as we say again and again. You speak all 7 life languages at some point, at least every day or every week. Even your weakest language, you can speak it. Even if it's only 7 or 10 on your profile out of 100, you still speak that language to some degree. And so we can always understand ourselves through that lens. Do I come into communication action-focused? What needs to get done? What will make things better? Or do I come in much more cognitive? Let me think about that. Do you have a plan? Are you making most of the resources? Are you really operating your life in a way that's effective? All those kinds of questions come into my interactions. Or maybe I'm the kind of person who approaches communication firstly through feeling. Do I feel connected to you? Do you feel I care about you? Do I feel you care about me? Do you get me? All of those kind of things are emotive. They're more in the heart than in the head, and that affects how I come across and how we connect. If we can begin to understand those things, then we'll be able to connect more fully, more deeply, more productively. Communication, of course, is two-ended. You can't have communication alone. If I recall, that was, I think, our takeaway from episode 1 or episode 2. You've got to be able to have somebody to practice with. And if you don't have a communication partner yet, let me encourage you again to find one. Somebody you can get it wrong with, who will help you understand, who will help you laugh about it, who will help you make it better next time. Because when we practice on one another, it's so valuable. I find that all the time. Some of the folks I coach are like communication partners with me. I had a guy the other day say to me, "Hey, I'm just so action-oriented that those feeling people really frustrate me, but I'm learning to find my feelings." And in our last conversation, he actually said to me, "I feel this." And I said, "Did you catch that? You told me you felt something." And he's like, "Oh yeah, maybe this is working." He was learning to operate out of all 7 languages and not just out of his top 1 or 2. So if communication's two-ended, the receiver needs to be able to receive what the sender sends. But if the receiver receives it differently than the sender intended, then the communication's going to be hindered. It's going to go awry. And that's why we need to be able to monitor our communication and to modify it, to adapt as we go. The word I use is bridge. How do I build a bridge so that we can communicate more effectively? How does the person I'm communicating with prefer to give and receive communication? Can I switch into the most appropriate language for us to make the connection? Once we've made a connection, we may switch together into another language, but again, we need to be sure we go there clearly and don't become confusing by muddying the languages together. A little bit like in kindergarten when you paint a picture, right? You want green grass and blue sky and a yellow sun, but if you mush it all together, it all becomes this sort of shade of grey-brown, and the picture gets lost. We want to keep the languages distinct in our communication, but be able to switch between them as appropriate. So I really value how life languages helps us to understand other people. And what I want to give you in this episode is some handles, if you like, some keys to how to use your life languages knowledge to be able to understand other people, how to connect with them. And primarily this is to do with learning the 7 languages and their specific characteristics so that I can identify which language are we speaking in this moment. Because we've said it before, I'll say it again, you speak all 7 languages. Even if we were to be having a conversation right now, we'd be speaking 2 or 3 of our different languages at different points of the conversation, depending on what we were talking about or where we were going. If we were talking about plans for a vacation together, we'd be speaking a different language than if we were talking about a friend who's got a challenge or a need, and how can we help them. Or it may be we're just shooting the breeze and hanging out and talking about the fun we had last weekend. That's a different language that we're speaking then to when we're speaking business plans or balancing the checkbook or whatever. So if I learn the specific characteristics of each of the 7 languages, then I can adapt how I communicate. I can switch into different languages. So the way I would communicate with someone whose primary language is the contemplator, for example, that would be very different from the way I'd communicate with someone whose primary language is the mover. And so with the contemplator, I would want to give that person my undivided attention. But I would also want to give them space to think and to process, because one of their strengths is that they process deeply and they dig deep and they discover stuff. I'm recalling a time where a friend of mine who was a first language contemplator wanted to get together with me to really learn how to connect with people, because that's something a contemplator has to work at, to learn how to make connections. And he knew that I'm a first language influencer. I connect with people just easily and automatically because it's part of how I'm wired. So he's like, can we get coffee once a week? And so we go to a coffee shop and we're talking about whatever, and I'm helping him to learn to connect, but he's helping me to learn to go deep and to discover things that I wouldn't otherwise discover. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, because this guy, I knew he needed both space to process and my undivided attention, otherwise our communication was going to be hindered. And so here am I in a coffee shop, and my tendency in a coffee shop is to be looking around, seeing who else is here, who do I know, who knows me, how can I encourage other people, make connections and that kind of thing. That was completely the opposite of what my buddy needed in that moment. And I had to train myself to speak contemplator, though that's a language that's lower in my profile by a long way from my influencer. So if I understand these things, then I can learn to adapt. And it helps me to adapt. You know, you don't build muscle if you don't go to the gym. You don't, like the standard meme, isn't it? You know, dude, do you even lift? It's something we work at and we grow in. In all of our professions, in all of our daily lives, we learn and we grow. Maybe it's learning to cook or learning new recipes. Maybe it's learning to speak a different language. Maybe it's learning how to exercise for health. There's all kinds of ways that we learn. And in communication, learning the 7 life languages is really the gym exercise that gives us that build-up of communication mastery. Time after time after time, the more we do it, the greater it gets and the more the fruit we see. So with my understanding of the life languages, I can begin to decode or translate when somebody's communicating with me in a language that maybe isn't one of my preferred languages. So I learn to hear through the lenses of that language and not just through my own. And therefore, I don't misinterpret people's motives or people's objectives in the communication. I can learn to hear it through the lens of whichever language they're speaking, so that we don't have a hindrance to our communication because I'm offended or it rubs me the wrong way. So, for example, my wife had a circumstance where a friend had asked her to help with an event, and this friend's first language was producer, which is a very hospitable, very resourceful language that likes to manage resources and make sure everything's in place so that you can feel welcomed, so you can feel that you've been taken care of. And so she is delegating some actions to my wife, who doesn't have producer as one of her high languages, but Jane knows the life languages well. And so when she arrived a little bit late, because she'd had a few other things to do, her first language is a very feely language of, do you care about me? And her friend is on the front doorstep, on the porch, with her hands on her hips saying, I really need that stuff you're bringing, and where is it? And she because it's interfering with her hospitality for this ladies' event she's organizing. But my wife was able to hear that through what she knew was her friend's first language and not be offended by it. If she hadn't understood the languages, her responder language would have been hurt. You don't care about me, and she would have gone into distress. So there's a great value also in being able to translate and to understand, to decode, if you like, how people are speaking to me and hear it through the language they're speaking rather than through my first preferred language. In both cases, if I can learn to do that, if I can learn to speak or act in the way that helps you most for us to make a connection, but also if you speak to me in a language that's not one I'm as comfortable with, I learn to hear it in that language and not through my primary ones, both of those things will begin to remove any hindrances to communication. Takes down some of the barriers. Misunderstanding is a huge problem in our society. It's a huge obstacle to communication. And too often we focus on what we don't like in an interaction, or what we don't agree with, or what we don't understand. With the life languages, I'm learning to focus on what I can understand, what I can see, where I can connect, so that we build trust, we build connectedness, and then we can build effective communication. We're building bridges all the time. It's an art and a science, but it's a skill we can learn. And it's a skill that's well worth learning, because you and the people you're interacting with will both benefit. You may recall in the last episode, we were talking about what each of us can learn from our life languages profile, what that profile can tell us, the major characteristics, the need from others, the filter question, the passion that each language carries, the character strength that each language brings to any interaction or any team. And also the distress flares that we see that show us when that language is getting empty in an interaction. All of those things are very valuable because that helps me to understand other people. And so if you and I are going to communicate, say, in the responder language that my wife is strong in, so if we want to express care for one another, or we need to increase our sense of being included for a specific person in a group, for example, the responder language will be the one that will achieve that, because it's a one-to-one, I care about you kind of expression. I want to show my care for you, so I want to speak responder. But I also know that the need from me in our interaction as we're speaking responder is you'll need to feel accepted, unconditionally accepted. Not, I'll accept you if you meet these criteria, but I accept you as you are so that we can get to where we need to get to. And you need to feel heard. You need to feel understood. And so I'm going to spend more time listening and expressing agreement. When I'm speaking responder, I'll often go, yeah, I get that, I hear you, tell me more, so that that's drawing out that feeling of being heard and understood. So with someone whose first language or whose primary language is responder, that's a very valuable technique to use to help them to feel that their tank is full and this communication is working. and that gives them confidence. And very often it will bring out feelings from their knowledge, their depth of feeling. It'll bring out feelings that are very valuable to us in whatever setting we're in, whether that's a work setting or whether it's a social setting. They'll feel valued, they'll feel cared for, they'll feel like you get them, that you understand, because that is a primary need for the responder language. So I'll give you more time to speak. I'll listen carefully. But all of those things wouldn't work if you and I are speaking, say, the mover language, because the mover language is all action-based and the filter question is very different. The need from others is very different. The mover's looking for action, of course, but also for congruency. Are we all going in the same direction? Are we shooting for the same target? Are you getting onto the highway and merging in without causing delay to everybody else? Or are you hesitating and dithering and getting in the way? Because the kind of catchphrase for the mover language is either lead or follow or get out of the way. And so that's a very different language from what we were just talking about with the responder. And so movers looking for our words and our deeds to line up and move us toward a common goal. It's all about innovation. It's all about making things better. It's all about raising the standard, of increasing justice, of making sure that wrongs get righted. It's a very courageous language. And so that's a very different scenario. And so if I understand that that's the language we're speaking, then I'll switch into that language more, answer the filter question, meet the need from others, really treasure the courageous strength that language gives, and make room for the passion to innovate. Well, what should we do differently? What should we do new? What do you think we should do first? It's like a wild Mustang. A wild Mustang is never going to pull a plow, but a wild Mustang might win a race, might be the leader of the herd. And so the mover language is a very valuable language, very strong language, but also a very valuable one. And so we make room for that, and then we benefit from everything that language brings to the picture. Remember, you have all 7 languages in your profile, just as I have all 7 in mine. Your mover may be much higher than mine. That would not be difficult. I think the last time I took my profile, my mover was about a 10 out of 100. So I have 10% of that language in my profile. However, I can still speak it when I need to. If you have that language higher, then I really value the courage and the bravery that you bring to situations. You're the kind of person who'd run into a burning building when the rest of us are running out. Maybe you're an EMT technician or a physician in an emergency room, somebody who thrives in a crisis, not by flailing around, but by knowing exactly what needs to be done to make a difference and having the courage to do it. So if we know the facts of the 7 life languages, that helps us tremendously to connect with other people. And I hope you're beginning to see just how valuable it is to invest a bit of time in learning all 7 so that you can speak all 7 as you need to. It may not change your own profile. You may still prefer your 1 or 2 top languages. Or you may be the kind of person who's fluent in 4 or 5 of the 7. Either way, that's a great value. Neither is right or wrong, better or worse. They're just different. But if you don't understand that you're different from other people, then you're going to get into trouble with communication. Understanding yourself, understanding others, both of those are the 2 ends of the bridge that enable us to communicate more fruitfully, more effectively. So we can learn to adapt. Adapt is a word I love. We've used it before in some of our takeaways. In fact, let's pause for today's takeaway. I've talked a lot about each language in your profile and how that's expressed, but the takeaway from today is you are a person, not a profile. So even when you've taken your profile, and don't hear me wrong here, I'm not saying don't take your profile. That would be like trying to drive with your eyes shut. You need to take your profile so you understand yourself more clearly, but don't limit yourself by saying, this is how I am and I can't change. You're a person, not a profile, is today's takeaway. And so you can learn to adapt, you can grow character in communication by learning to bridge into other languages as you need to. You're not defined by your profile, and you're not limited by your profile. It doesn't put you in a box. Sometimes I have people who haven't gone far enough in their understanding of life languages. They maybe took their profile and saw their first language was, let's say, Shaper, which is a planning kind of language. It's a leadership kind of language. It's a very goal-oriented and very methodical language. It's a cognitive language. But they go around saying to people, well, I'm a Shaper. Well, no, you're not. You're all 7. So don't just give us your Shaper. Yes, it may be your strongest, but we need the rest of your profile as well in order to get the benefit of the whole of who you are and how you're wired, how you bring yourself to our interaction. So you're not defined by your profile. It describes you, but it doesn't limit you. You can take that self-awareness that we talked about in episode 3, I think it was, but then you grow your knowledge of all 7 languages to become a masterful communicator. So the key question in any interaction is, which language are we speaking? And I've alluded to that all the way through this podcast so far. Let me take you a step deeper into that. In an interaction, you don't need to see someone else's profile report to understand which language we're speaking. As you grow your knowledge of the languages, you start with which intelligence category is this interaction in? Is this an action interaction? Are we looking at what needs to get done, or the tasks that have been missed, or the needs that we see that we can put on a list that we're going to complete as soon as we can? Or is this an action conversation of, these are the things I've seen that need to change, that need to be improved. Let's get on with making a difference. Let's change this. Let's add that. Let's innovate to make a difference and raise the standard. If this is an action conversation, that brings us into 2 languages that are polar opposites in other ways, but they share the action characteristic. And so once I've decided this is an action conversation, if it's about innovation, then I'm looking at the mover language. But if it's about a passion to finish things and to get tasks completed, and it's more practical, day-to-day, here are all the things and let's check them off the list, then that's the doer language. And so I can distinguish which language from that action intelligence category by whether this is start or finish. They're in opposite directions within that category. Or it may be a completely different category of interaction. Our communication may be all about feelings. It may be feelings based of how can I encourage you? Or it could be feelings based in the area of I really care about what you're going through and I want to make a difference, and I'm really committed to making a difference to this need or this cause or this person or this role. And so if it's a feeling interaction, again, we have 2 languages in the feeling intelligence category, the influencer and the responder. The influencer is a one-to-many kind of language. It's a bring the group together. It's build the team. It's encourage everyone. Make sure no one's left out. Whereas the responder language is much more one-to-one. It's where I care about you, and I'm going to focus on you until you know that I care about you. Or you're going to focus on me because you care about something I'm going through. And we're going to focus on that together and kind of wrap ourselves around it until we find something that resolves that need or meets that desire. And so in the feeling interactions, again, we've got opposites. Is this one-to-one or is this one-to-many? Am I just me to you, or is it let's bring everyone together? Then we know whether we're speaking influencer or responder. Again, they're polar opposites. They are completely different in their needs, in their filter questions, in their passions, in their strengths, and in the distress they exhibit if those things are not met. Or thirdly, the third intelligence category is this a thinking interaction? Is this all about what do I think and what do you think? And there are different forms of thinking. There are different focus points within that thinking. You may be focused on the plan and the strategy, and the shaper is the strategic language. It's all about the plan. On the other hand, you may be focused more on making the most of what we have. It's more of a management skill than a leadership skill. It's resourceful, it's hospitable, it's financially adept. That's the producer language. Or thirdly, we may be talking and communicating around thinking simply for the process of discovery, of uncovering things that are deeper than anybody else has ever discovered. There's always more to find. Let's peel back the layers. Let's go deeper. Let's figure out what we can do. It's a very powerful language, the contemplator language, a very powerful language in discovery and innovation. It's probably the most intelligent of the 7 languages. And so those skills of determining which language are we speaking in this interaction, or let's suppose you're in a business team, for example, and we've got a project to complete. Well, which languages do we need to draw on in order for us to be able to complete this project effectively and fruitfully and profitably? So if we can figure out which language are we speaking, that is a huge benefit in terms of our understanding of others and growing our understanding of others to make our communication more effective, more fruitful, until we achieve communication mastery. So what I've just talked about, the skill, if you like, of adapting to which language are we speaking and discerning which language are we speaking in this interaction, because remember, we speak all 7 languages at some point each day. The skill of determining which language to speak or which language are we communicating in is part of the introductory resource bundle that's available now on my website. And so you can get on my website and look at the details of that, purchase that. It's very low cost, so it's easy to get to. But the introductory resource bundle will really increase your skill in being able to adapt and bridge into the different languages so that you can make the most of your unique profile and to connect with the others around you who are different, so that out of the teamwork and out of the interaction, we get the most benefit from your communication. You can give me feedback on my website as well. Just look for the contact form, fill in your email address and your feedback. Let me know what you'd like to hear about in future episodes. I've got a lot of different things planned. We're going to go deeper into some specific situations in future episodes. But that's it for today. Remember our takeaway: you are a person, not a profile. And then go to the website, pick up the introductory resource bundle. There's a video unit there that you will find really helpful, as well as that chart that I just described in words of how to figure out which language are we speaking. Have a great time. I'll see you in the next episode.